Hello friends, this is Ganesh and video number 5 on object-oriented ABAP. In this session, I'm going to explain the concept or methodology called inheritance in object-oriented ABAP. So the very basic understanding of inheritance is we are going to retrieve or we are going to derive a class based on an existing class. A class has its own attributes and own methods. So that methods has some functionality. That functionality might be used fully for my requirement. So I'm going to get it, or I'm going to derive it, or I'm going to inherit those things to my class for my requirement. So sometimes it may not be 100%. So I'm going to make use of it. It's like I'm going to derive it, then I'm going to use my own logic. So I don't want to do anything from the scratch if it is already available. And this is purely design. So if you're going to create a project, you're going to work for a module or a project in object-oriented fashion. So you have to keep some common codings, common data in a class, and whoever is required the common data or common attributes, they can derive it for their own class and they can make use of it either 100% or they may need some 20% of code from their own module, they can make use of it. So that is the idea of inheritance. Okay. So already repeating the same statement most of the videos, like object oriented is a design. It's not like, okay, I have a requirement, I'm going to start writing in class. No, please do a proper design. So when you want constructor, when you want a static constructor, when you need an inheritance, so do a proper design, then you can start coding it. So coding is very simple. Normally, you know how to code in ABAP level, right? Maybe the same select statement, loop statement, if conditions, whatever it is. But how you're designing is very important once you start with object-oriented ABAP concept. Okay. So here I'm going to explain the inheritance, one of the methodologies. So after this, you can design your even a simple report also. If required, you can design in the inheritance and way. Let's get into the slides. So the first one is derive the new class. Normally we call it as a subclass, and the terminologies are little important once you start learning the inheritance concept. From an existing class, we call it as superclass. Okay, so superclass is nothing but there is a class which is already derived or designed, and from there you're going to get something. We call it as derive the new class. So we call it as inherited, derived, or you acquired, whatever it is. It's called that particular class is called subclass. Very basic terminology of inheritance is superclass, subclass. And subclass is nothing but it inherits the data and methods of a class. So class is nothing but it contains either attributes or methods. On methods is nothing but method with the parameters. It has a constructor. Constructor also coming under a special method. So it has only data and method. So inheritance means you can inherit only data and methods from any class. So that is called, so subclass inherits the data and methods of a superclass. Nothing much. And able to use or override the superclass methods and data value. Okay, so meaning either you can use whatever it is. For a simple example, there is a superclass which has a variable called a, and the value of variable is assigned as 100 in superclass. So you want the variable along with the same value to be used in your subclass, you can use it. Or once you inherit, I want to change the value of a from 100 to 120 based on my requirement, you can change it. So that is the meaning of either you can use the methods or data attribute value as it is, or you can overwrite it. Okay, depends on your requirement or depends on your need in the subclass. Advantages is like reusability, and it include additional concept without overwriting the base class concept. So it's like overwriting means you're not going to disturb anything of your superclass. So once you inherited, that is yours. Okay, you can make use of the output or you can make use of the functionality of the method or the attribute. It's not like once you overwrite it's changed the superclass also. No. Okay, so you can just make changes whatever you want. It never affects the superclass functionality or superclass attribute values. So these are the advantages of inheritance. So reusability is a big advantage of inheritance. And as I mentioned, in a design, you have to decide what are the code is going to superclass and what are the kind of code is coming to the subclass. Okay, so it's purely designing purpose. Another one, disadvantages. So we have disadvantages as well in the inheritance concept. In often, suppose base class properties left unused. Suppose a superclass has like 50 attributes or created, and if it is subclasses and in the visibility section, maybe it's a public or protected. We'll see the visibility section for inheritance quite later. Suppose you have 50 attributes in a superclass which has all public attributes, and in a subclass you're going to use only 2 attributes. So what happens once you inherited everything. So there is no restriction. I want out of 50 public attributes, I want only 2. So that is not possible. If it is 50 is declared as a public, all the 50 comes to your subclass. Okay. So if it is not used, it leads for the memory wastage. So you have to design very properly which attributes are coming under superclass and which are coming under subclass and which are coming under public, which are coming under protected or a private attribute. Okay. And base class change might affect all the derived classes. So you designed a superclass and it's used most of the subclasses, maybe 5 subclasses, or under the superclass they derived everything from the superclass. And if you change the functionality of the superclass, it affects all the derived classes. Okay, so that is also one of the disadvantage in the inheritance concept. Suppose if you are changing, if it is applicable for all the derived class, then it's well and good. But if applicable only for one subclass, then you have to make sure it's not affecting the other 4 subclasses. So that you have to make sure. It's slower than normal function, obviously, because there is a superclass and there is a hierarchy of 10 subclasses. Okay, and there are different hierarchy level also. You can create a subclasses one by one. If that is the case, what happens if you execute it? It has to load all the hierarchy level of subclasses. Okay, so that way it's going to be the slower function comparatively for the normal subroutine or normal functions. So these are few disadvantages of inheritance. So this is about advantage and disadvantages over here. Okay, so you have quite a lot, probably you might get it. And yeah, so I'm going to give an overview of class A and class B, like which is superclass, what are the terminologies you should know. So once it is done, I will get into the system. So first, class A and class B, consider this is my superclass and this is my subclass. I'm deriving the property of superclass into subclass. Okay, and the first point is superclass is nothing but the class which is having a attribute and methods. It's able to give the properties to the subclass. Okay, so that is called superclass. And superclass, if you define a superclass, it should not be a final class. There is an option to define your class as a final, meaning if you define any class as a final, so no one is able to get or derive anything from your superclass. So make sure if you're creating a superclass, especially in SE24, there is a checkbox called final class. It's by default is always has checked. So you have to remove it, otherwise you're not able to inherit anything from your superclass. Third, visibility section. Okay, so there are 3 visibility sections you might aware of now: public, protected, and private. So here public and protected variables are able to derive by subclass. Okay, so private is still private, even though if you inherit anything, the private variable or method never inherited to your subclass. Okay, so private is always private. Okay, there are some restrictions. We'll see while you come to a friends class. We'll see how to access a private attribute as well. Constructors. Okay, so this is another important concept, like constructors, because if you derive, whether I can derive the constructors as well, because constructor is a special method. It can trigger automatically. You don't want to call explicitly, right? So you have to make sure if the superclass has a constructor, how my subclass constructor will work. Okay. And the final one in superclass is a keyword called super. Suppose I want to call my superclass method. So there are technically, if you call implementation, okay, I have a method. It is implemented in my superclass. it might be redefined and implemented in my subclass also. So from a subclass, I want to call the same method implementation from a superclass. You have to use a keyword called super. Okay, super is a keyword. It helps to access your superclass attributes from your subclass. Okay, in the same class, if you want to access, normally we use a keyword or variable called me. Okay, the same way superclass. So this keyword is going to be called superclass attributes from a subclass. And another one is subclass or inherited class. So subclass attributes are, we call it as a subclass or inherited class or derived class, whatever it is. Can be a superclass. Yes, your subclass will be a superclass for another subclass. Okay, so these are very simple terminologies, very easy to remember. Okay, so I have a class A superclass. I have a diagram. I will show you as well. So now you just remember, the subclass can be a superclass as well. Okay, redefinition, meaning I inherited the method. Normally redefinition is especially for methods. I inherited or derived the method from superclass to my subclass. How can I use it? Okay, I can call. It will give all the output of the method. It will execute the function. Everything is nothing but a call. But I want to redefine it based on my requirement. Okay, so in that case, you can use a concept called redefinition. You have to redefine the method which you inherited from class A to class B. Then only you are able to add your own methodology or your own concepts. Okay, so you have to redefine any superclass method for subclass implementation. Constructors, same thing. So class B is a subclass, it has its own constructor. Class A is a superclass, it has its own constructor. So how and when the constructors are working, superclass constructors are working or subclass constructors are working, you have to just run a very few examples. So it will be very easy and very clear for you. Okay, so these are the things you should remember once before you start working on inheritance. And super keyword, I think I'll almost covered. So able to call the superclass properties, I have to use super, but not for the attributes. It's only for methods. So that's what mentioned here. I have a superclass attributes. You don't want to use super keyword. Super keyword is only to call superclass methods, not attributes. And the previous implementation of the same method. Suppose you can call, suppose I have a method 1, method 2 in superclass, and method 1 and method 2 I inherited in my subclass. In that case, you can call method 1 implementation from the superclass. Okay, you can't go in a different way like, okay, I'm in a method 2, I want method 1 superclass implementation in my subclass method 2. That is not possible. That's what I mentioned of the same method. So I am in the same method M1 in subclass, then I can call the superclass implementation as well. Okay, so everything I will show you in the system. So these are some few points about the super keyword. And yeah, this is the way how the things are working here. It's a hierarchy. Like I have a class A superclass and I'm deriving it. So it's a subclass, class B. And now I am going to derive from class B. So what happens? Class B is a subclass for class A and class B is a superclass for class C. So this scenario is possible. Okay. So then what do you have in class C? Only class B? No. So if you have 3 attributes of class A, like A1, A2, A3, and here if you derive, so all A1, A2, A3 comes here. I'm going to add A4, A5, and if you derive class C, you will get A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. So class C has inherited methods and attributes of both classes. Okay, and this is another way. So one superclass, I have 2 subclasses. So depends on the requirement, you can design it, whether you want this way or you want your subclass and superclass like this. So depends on your requirement, you can design it. Yeah. Anything else? No. Okay. So now I'm going to show you very simple examples of inheritance in SE24, because in local class you are not able to see invisible. You're not able to see, okay, this is derived. Okay, all the attributes are carry forward to my subclass. That is not possible in local class definition. That's why I'm taking you to SE24 first. This This is my system. C24. So I'm going to create my superclass first. Okay. There are some naming conventions, so better you follow once you start working with your project. So ZJI super class. So this is my superclass, and this is what I'm saying. Always the final is checked. So I want to remove this because I want this class to be superclass. The people wants to retrieve, they can retrieve from this class. Take out the final check mark and click save. Local object. I'm going to keep some attributes first and then methods. Then we'll see how it's reflected in subclass. So here I'm going to say superclass. Okay, SUP superclass instance attribute 1. Okay. So level as instance attribute, visibility as public. We'll keep all three. Let's see how it works. Then I'm going to keep superclass static attribute 2. Static attributes. This is public. Character 10. Another one. Superclass protected attribute 3. So it may be a static or instance, whatever it is. Go with instance protected attribute. And this is going to be protected. Character 10. So the next one is private superclass private attribute number 4, and this is going to be instance or static, whatever it is. This is going to be private. I can type, that is faster. Private character 10. Okay. So these are the attributes of my superclass. Let me have a method. Superclass instance method level instance visibility public. Okay. And superclass static method instance static visibility public. Another one, superclass protected method instance protected superclass private method, maybe it may be a static, and this is going to be private. Okay, so that there is no parameters. It doesn't make any difference. If you want, you can have a parameters as well. Okay, let me activate this. There's no code so far. Activate the entire class. It's done. It's active. So now let me create a subclass. /row IC24. So if you want to learn any methodology or a concept, so don't dump any logic inside it. Okay, so let's understand how this works with a very simple write statement or some variables. I'm sorry, variables and everything. So once you're comfortable, then you can add some concepts like loop, read, select, whatever it is. I am going to make, okay, let me take out this. Maybe I can create one more subclass, keeping this as a superclass. So I'm taking the final out, save it, local object. Now go to the properties here, go to the properties and click the option called Superclass. Just click the button, then you will get a one input box enabled. Here it is. Give the superclass name. So my superclass name is CGI underscore super. Okay, done. Now go to attributes. Now I'm going to create subclass attributes. So till once you activate, you're able to see. Okay, just wait for it. I'm saying subclass attributes. So subclass instance attribute one. It's going to be a instance attribute and it's going to be public. Okay. This is going to be character 10. Subclass static attribute 2 static attributes. Let me keep this also public. Character 10. Another one I'm going to keep subclass protected attribute 3 instance protected character 10. Finally, I'm going to keep subclass private attribute 4 static private character 10. So then go to methods. I'm going to create some subclass methods. Subclass instance method, instance, and visibility as public. Another one is subclass static method static public, and final one is subclass protected method instance protected subclass private method then static private. Okay, I'm almost done. Now I'm going to activate it. Once you activate, you just come to know it's going to retrieve the possible or applicable attributes and methods from the superclass. Let me activate it. Okay, so now go to attributes. Yeah, it's I think the filter is on. Just take out the filter and it shows everything. So whatever in the blue non-editable mode, those are your superclass attribute. So superclass instance attribute 1, superclass static attribute, superclass protected attribute, everything you're able to see over here. But private is missing. You're not able to see the private attribute of your superclass in your subclass. So it's derived. Then if you go to methods also Okay, filter is already removed. So if there is a filter, you are not able to see the superclass properties or methods, whatever it is. Okay. So just take out the filter. This is very simple error which we used to do in the initial days. And take out the filter, you are able to see superclass instant method, superclass static method, superclass protected method, private is not derived. Okay, so private is always private, even the subclass won't able to get that in their subclass methods or attributes, whatever it is. So now you're able to clear about the inheritance. Okay, this is the way it got derived. Okay, so now I'm going to make use of it. Okay, before that, let me have one more subclass. Subclass 2. Okay, so create it. I'm not going to have subclass 2 attributes or methods because you are aware of it. So I'm going to keep the subclass 2 as a final. No one is able to retrieve after this or from this class. Subclass 2, save it. I'm going to keep my subclass 1 as a superclass for this subclass 2. So go to properties, superclass, CGI sub, okay, and activate it. I'm not going to add this class own attributes or method. Let's keep empty. Activate your subclass 2. So now, as I mentioned, it should retrieve all the properties, applicable properties of subclass, means ZJI subclass, as well as the superclass. Okay, just click attribute. So here able to see subclass attribute 1, superclass attribute 1, 2, 3 and subclass attribute 1, 2 and 3. Same thing is applicable for methods also. So go to methods, subclass instance method, static, protected and subclass instance, static and protected. Okay. So here I'm going to have very simple write statement. Then I'm going to execute this class. Okay. Let me start with superclass first. My superclass, I'm going to assign some values for the attributes and I'm going to call it in the subclass. Let's see how it behaves. So this is very important to understand the concepts rather than writing all the loop, read, everything we can do it a little later. Okay, let's have, these are attributes, character, right? Superclass attribute 1. 3, 5, 8, 10. Okay. And superclass attribute 2, superclass attribute 3. Instead of method, I'm just giving an initial value. And this private attribute doesn't make any difference because anyway, we are not going to access this private from my subclass. Okay. Now, going to methods and have a write statement over there. Superclass instance method. So get into the method, have a simple write statement. So write superclass instance method called. Okay. Let's go back, do the same for other methods as well. Static. But if it is static, you have to make sure you can call using static, what is that, class name or instance. So that you have to make sure in the subclass as well. Here it is superclass static method called. Okay. So this is technically we call it a superclass implementation. That should be, you have to remember this always, subclass implementation. Okay. So write superclass protected method implementation called. Forget about if there is any spelling mistake. Implementation call. Okay, that's it. I'm not going to keep anything in private. Anyway, I'm not going to call. So let it be. Act toward it. So everything is done in superclass, nothing in subclass, right? Now I'm going to use the variables. Okay, let me go to subclass 1, hierarchy level. So go to subclass. I'm going to make use of this attribute, just a write statement. Okay, so you don't want to call, or you are not able to call this attribute using super keyword. So what I'm going to do is, I'm in a subclass. I have my own methods like subclass instance method. Get into the subclass instance method, and I'm going to write the values of superclass attributes. Write superclass attribute values. So meaning I'm going to use it. Okay, I'm not modifying anything as of now. I'm going to make use of superclass attribute values. Right. So subclass instance method, superclass instance attribute. Just control space bar, you will get it. You can see the difference as well. So there are little bold. It's mentioned it's or super. It's like this. Control space bar, super, control space bar, superclass. Okay, attributes. So this is protected attribute. Let me have static attribute as well. And what is next one? Superclass underscore protected attribute. I am inside the class, so I don't want any object to do that, right? If it is outside you are going to try, then you need an object. So let me activate this. I want to activate everything. Oops. Okay, these are not mine, I believe. Yep. It's okay. I'm trying to activate others. It might give an error. Let's see. Okay, here it's just something happened. It's like it's went to non-responding mode, and I just killed the session, and it shows it's again I'm trying to edit the subclass. It shows it's logged by the same user. I tried to remove the log from SM12. It's getting to dump. SM12 is getting to dump. So I just copied the subclass from YJI subclass to, sorry, ZJI sub underscore subclass to another class. It's very easy. You know how to copy the object. Same thing I did, YJI sub, and the superclass, everything is same. Okay, so there is no change. So forget about it, just for your information. So here the subclass, I try to use the superclass attributes. Let's see the output. So you can execute over here, or you can create an object from SE38. That also you can do it. Here it shows only static attribute and static method because I'm not creating any instance. Once you create an instance, automatically it will show you the instance attribute and instance method. So this is superclass attribute 2, and this is subclass attribute 2, and this is superclass static method, and this is subclass static method. Okay, I'm going to create an instance. Now you're able to see superclass instant attribute as well and subclass instant attribute as well. So the code I return in my subclass instance method. So I'm going to execute it. Subclass instance method. I'm going to execute it. Just click. This is the output. It shows superclass attribute values. I executed a subclass method, but inside I used it. I didn't call. I just used it because it derived already, so I can make use of it. Okay. I didn't change the value of it. So that's why it shows subclass attribute 1, subclass attribute 2, subclass attribute 3. So these are the value which I added in the default section of my superclass. So here I added here, right? Superclass attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3, the same thing as displayed here. Superclass attribute 1, superclass 2, and superclass attribute 3. Okay, so this is the way it's like how to design a superclass and how to design a subclass. And while activating it, after activating, you are able to see the superclass attributes or get into the subclass. It may be attribute or method. So that way I showed you, and I just used the superclass attributes. I didn't modify anything. I simply used it. Okay. Now I'll show you the few things in the subclass. Then we'll close this session. About the methods, okay, I mentioned, right, there are some terminologies like subclass implementation, superclass implementation. So this is my superclass method. Okay, it's in blue color, non-editable, and if I double click, what happens is it shows a pop-up. It shows clearly the method name is implemented in class ZJI super. So this is not yet implemented in your subclass. Okay, because I didn't do the redefinition part. So if I double click any of my subclass methods, it's take me to the subclass. So if I continue, it will take you to the superclass implementation. So this is the ZJI superclass, and this is the method, this is the write statement. And if I double click subclass method, it takes me directly to the subclass method code, like editor. Just double click, it will take me, because this is my subclass method. So this you should very clearly understand. So these initial methods are available, implementation is available only in your superclass. If you double click superclass static method, double click, excuse me, yep, actually the connection lost. Maybe if I repeat the same statement, so sorry for that. Just double click superclass static method. It shows very clearly your method, this method is implemented in class super, CJI super only. Just continue, it will take you to the superclass and this method implementation. So this is superclass static method implementation. Okay, so just play around. It's very simple concept, inheritance, but very useful concept if you design any project for your daily development. And make sure you are good with the design. As I mentioned, have different type of methods, attributes, and everything. Keep some values, keep some write statement, and make yourself very comfortable with inheritance about superclass, subclass, hierarchy of subclass, and everything. Okay, so thank you for your time. We'll continue with other video, continuation of this inheritance in the another video. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video. Bye.